Ahmed had always believed that hard work should bring immediate results. But as years passed with little change, doubt crept into his heart. Was his struggle meaningless? Was fate against him? Just when he was about to lose hope, his father shared a lesson, one that would change his perspective forever. A lesson hidden in the quiet, unseen growth of a simple bamboo plant. In a quiet village nestled between rolling hills and endless fields of golden wheat, an old farmer named Iqbal lived with his family. He had spent his entire life tilling the land, sowing seeds, and waiting patiently for nature to reward his hard work. For decades, he had seen good times and bad times, but he never wavered in his belief that persistence would always bear fruit. However, in recent years, things had changed. The rains had become unpredictable, the soil had lost its fertility, and the debt he owed to the local moneylender had grown beyond what he could repay. Every morning, he would walk across his fields, observing the dry cracks in the soil, feeling the weight of his struggles pressing down on his shoulders. Iqbal was not the only one suffering. Other farmers in the village had already given up, selling their lands and moving to the city in search of better opportunities. His neighbors often whispered behind his back, wondering why he still clung to a life that only seemed to bring hardship. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Iqbal sat outside his small mud house. He held a simple clay cup filled with tea, staring into the distance. His son, Ahmed, a young man in his early 20s, approached him. "Father, I need to talk to you," Ahmed said hesitantly. Iqbal looked up, sensing the seriousness in his son's voice. He gestured for him to sit down beside him on the wooden bench. "Father, why do you keep doing this?" Ahmed asked, his voice filled with frustration. "Year after year, we work on this land. We plow, we sow, we pray, and yet, what do we get? Nothing but struggle. Nothing but disappointment." Iqbal took a slow sip of his tea before answering. "Ahmed, my son, do you remember the first time you helped me in the fields?" Ahmed nodded. "Yes, I was 10 years old. You gave me a small bag of seeds and asked me to scatter them carefully. I was so excited." Iqbal smiled at the memory. "And what happened after that?" Ahmed sighed. "I waited. Every day, I would run to the field, expecting to see little plants sprouting. But nothing happened. I thought the seeds were dead." Iqbal chuckled. "Yes. And do you remember what I told you then?" Ahmed hesitated for a moment, then spoke slowly. "You told me that growth takes time. That even when we can't see anything happening above the ground, something is happening beneath the soil." Iqbal nodded. "Exactly. The same is true for life, my son. Just because we don't see success immediately doesn't mean our efforts are wasted. Everything meaningful takes time." Ahmed shook his head in frustration. "But, Father, this isn't about patience anymore. We've been patient for years. Look at our neighbors, many of them have left the village. They've gone to the city and found jobs. Some of them send money back to their families. But here we are, still struggling, still waiting for the rains that may never come." Iqbal placed his cup down and turned to face his son directly. His eyes, though old and weary, still held a quiet strength. "Ahmed, do you think leaving everything behind is the only solution?" "I don't know," Ahmed admitted. "But I do know that I don't want to spend my entire life like this. I don't want to watch you suffer. I want a better life for us." Iqbal sighed, his heart heavy. He understood his son's pain. He had once been young, too, filled with dreams of a different life. But he also knew something that Ahmed had yet to learn: life was not just about running away from struggles, it was about facing them, learning from them, and growing stronger. "Come with me tomorrow morning," Iqbal said suddenly. "I will show you something." Ahmed frowned. "Show me what?" "You will see." Ahmed wanted to argue, but he saw the certainty in his father's expression. He sighed and nodded. Fine. I'll come. That night, as he lay on his thin mattress, staring up at the wooden ceiling, Ahmed couldn't stop thinking. He respected his father, but he couldn't understand why he refused to give up. What was the point of all this suffering? Wasn't life supposed to be about finding happiness? Somewhere outside, a lonely wind blew through the dry fields. The land was silent, waiting, just like Ahmed, waiting for an answer. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Iqbal and Ahmed set out on foot. The cool morning air carried the faint scent of wet earth, though there had been no rain for weeks. Birds chirped softly as the two walked in silence. Iqbal led Ahmed to the farthest edge of their farmland, where the land was uneven and untouched. It was a place Ahmed rarely paid attention to, a corner of the farm where wild plants grew freely. There, standing side by side, were two trees. One was a tall, sturdy mango tree, its branches spreading wide, offering shade. The other was a thin, weak-looking bamboo shoot, barely a few feet tall. Iqbal pointed at them. "Do you see these two trees?" Ahmed nodded. "Yes." "What about them?" Iqbal placed a hand on the mango tree's thick trunk. This tree grew fast. Within a few years, it became strong, bearing fruit for the village. People admire it. Then, he turned to the bamboo. "And this? It looks weak, doesn't it?" "Yes," Ahmed agreed. "It's so small compared to the mango tree. Maybe it doesn't get enough nutrients." Iqbal shook his head. "No, my son. This bamboo is not weak, it is waiting. For years, it has been growing its roots deep into the ground. It may look like it has barely grown, but when the time is right, it will suddenly shoot up, growing taller than even the mango tree." Ahmed stared at the small bamboo shoot, then back at his father. "What does this have to do with us?" Iqbal smiled. "We are like the bamboo, my son. Just because we don't see immediate success doesn't mean we are failing. Our roots, our strength, our knowledge, our patience, are growing. And one day, when the time is right, we will rise." Ahmed was silent for a long moment. The words sank deep into his heart, planting a seed of understanding. For the first time, he saw his father's struggles not as failures, but as part of a greater journey. As they walked back home, Ahmed glanced at his father with newfound respect. Maybe he had been too quick to lose hope. Maybe, just maybe, his father was right. And maybe, just like the bamboo, their time would come. The next morning, the golden rays of the rising sun stretched across the vast fields, casting long shadows over the land. The scent of damp earth lingered in the air, a reminder of the early morning dew that clung to the blades of grass. Ahmed walked beside his father, his step steady but his mind still clouded with uncertainty. He had spent the night thinking about their conversation, replaying his father's words about patience and unseen growth. He wanted to believe in them, but his heart still carried doubts. They reached the farthest corner of the farm, where the two trees stood, the mighty mango tree with its lush green leaves swaying gently in the breeze and the small bamboo shoot, thin and seemingly fragile. Ahmed watched as his father walked up to the bamboo, touching its thin stem with a reverent hand. 5 years ago, Iqbal began, his voice calm but firm, "I planted both this mango tree and this bamboo on the same day. I watered them, gave them care, and made sure they had everything they needed. Yet, after a few months, the mango tree began to grow tall, while the bamboo remained just a tiny sprout." Ahmed looked at the two plants, side by side, the stark contrast between them making his father's words more real. He had seen these trees many times before but had never truly paid attention. "For years, I saw no change in the bamboo," Iqbal continued. "It did not shoot up, did not spread its leaves, did not even appear to grow at all. Many would have assumed it was weak, that it would never thrive. Some might have even uprooted it, believing it was a waste of space." Ahmed furrowed his brows, still unsure where his father was going with this lesson. "But why? Why didn't it grow like the mango tree? Iqbal smiled softly. Because it was growing in a different way. It was growing where no one could see, underground. While the mango tree was reaching for the sky, the bamboo was deepening its roots, spreading them far and wide beneath the surface. It was preparing itself, strengthening its foundation. And then, after 5 long years, something incredible happened. Iqbal gestured toward the bamboo shoot. Suddenly, it began to grow. And when it started, it did not grow slowly, it shot up faster than any tree in the village. In just a few months, it reached heights that took the mango tree years to achieve. Ahmed's eyes widened slightly. All that time, it was just building its roots. Yes, Iqbal nodded. Because if it had not, it would not have been able to support its own growth. Bamboo grows fast, but only after it has secured a strong foundation. Without deep roots, it would collapse the moment it faced strong winds. Ahmed crossed his arms, thinking about his father's words. So, you're saying, we are like this bamboo? That even though it looks like we are failing, we are actually growing where no one can see. Iqbal placed a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. Exactly, my son. Life often works this way. People think success comes from immediate results, but true success comes from patience, persistence, and unseen growth. Many give up too soon, not realizing they were just about to break through. Ahmed let out a slow breath. He wanted to believe in his father's wisdom, but doubt still lingered. But what if we never get our chance to grow? What if we keep waiting, and nothing ever changes? Iqbal chuckled, his deep voice rich with experience. That is where faith comes in. Not just faith in destiny, but faith in yourself. You must trust that your hard work is not in vain. Just because you do not see progress does not mean it isn't happening. You must keep going, even when the results seem invisible. Ahmed nodded slowly. He wanted to trust in that idea, but patience had never been his strong suit. He had always been restless, always eager to see immediate results. Yet, something about his father's words struck a chord deep within him. For years, he had seen his father endure hardship after hardship. He had watched him struggle against nature's unpredictability, against financial burdens, against disappointment. And yet, he never saw him break. His father stood firm, much like the bamboo preparing for its moment to rise. Iqbal continued, many people chase shortcuts. They want quick success, easy wealth, an effortless life. But shortcuts often lead to nowhere. A tree that grows too fast without strong roots will fall at the first storm. But a tree that takes its time, that builds its foundation, will stand for generations. Ahmed looked at the bamboo shoot once more, his mind racing with thoughts. He had always viewed their struggles as failures, but what if they weren't? What if, all this time, they had been laying down their roots, preparing for something greater? A breeze rustled the leaves of the mango tree, and Ahmed watched as the bamboo shoot swayed gently. It did not resist the wind, it moved with it, flexible yet unshaken. There was a lesson in that too, he realized. Iqbal broke the silence again. Do you know why bamboo is one of the strongest plants in the world? Ahmed shook his head. Because it bends, but it does not break, his father said with a smile. No matter how strong the storm, no matter how fierce the wind, bamboo does not resist, it moves with the force, absorbing it, surviving it. And once the storm passes, it stands tall again. Ahmed absorbed those words, feeling something stir inside him. He had always believed that strength meant standing rigid against hardship, but maybe true strength was about endurance, about being flexible yet unbreakable. Iqbal gave his son a knowing look. Life will throw many storms your way, Ahmed. You will face struggles, disappointments, failures. But if you build your roots deep, if you learn to bend without breaking, you will rise, just like the bamboo. A long silence stretched between them, but it was no longer an uncomfortable one. It was filled with thought, reflection, and a growing understanding. For the first time in a long while, Ahmed felt something shift within him. Maybe he had been too impatient. Maybe he had been so focused on what wasn't happening that he had ignored what was. He looked at his father, truly seeing him for the first time, not just as a struggling farmer, but as a man who had endured, who had built strong roots through years of hardship, who had never let the storms of life break him. Ahmed inhaled deeply, letting the lesson settle within him. He still didn't have all the answers, but for the first time, he was willing to wait. To trust. To believe that his time, too, would come. As they turned to leave, Ahmed cast one last look at the bamboo shoot. It was still small, still unassuming. But now, he saw it differently. He saw its strength, its patience, its quiet determination. And in that moment, he made a silent promise to himself. He would not give up. He would not lose hope. He would grow, just like the bamboo. The days passed, and something within Ahmed began to change. His father's words about the bamboo had left a deep impression on him. He no longer saw their struggles as mere suffering but as part of a larger journey. Though doubt still lingered, he found himself observing things differently. He noticed how the earth, though dry and cracked, still held the promise of life. He saw how birds built their nests, twig by twig, never stopping, never giving up. He saw how the farmers who remained in the village continued to wake up before dawn, tending to their fields with quiet determination, despite uncertain harvests. One evening, as Ahmed sat beside his father outside their home, he finally spoke his mind. "Father, I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About the bamboo and the mango tree. About how growth happens where we can't see it." Iqbal, who had been staring at the horizon, turned to his son with a small smile. "And what have you realized?" Ahmed exhaled slowly, his fingers tracing patterns in the dirt. "That maybe I've been too impatient. Maybe I've been looking for quick results without understanding the time it takes to build something strong." Iqbal nodded, pleased with his son's words. "Patience, my son, is not about waiting idly. It's about trusting the process while continuing to work hard." Ahmed leaned back, his eyes scanning the darkening sky. But what if, despite all the patience and hard work, nothing ever changes? What if we keep trying, but fate has already decided that we are meant to struggle forever? Iqbal chuckled softly. "You remind me of myself when I was your age. I used to ask my father the same question. Do you want to know what he told me?" Ahmed sat up, intrigued. "What did he say?" Iqbal gazed at the stars beginning to appear in the sky. "He told me a story. Would you like to hear it?" Ahmed nodded eagerly, always fascinated by his father's wisdom. Iqbal cleared his throat and began. "Once, there was a man who lived in a small village much like ours. He was a carpenter, skilled with his hands, but no matter how hard he worked, he never seemed to earn enough. His house was falling apart, his tools were old, and his family often went to sleep hungry. One day, after years of struggling, he decided he had had enough. Why do I keep working so hard if nothing changes, he asked himself. Perhaps fate has already decided that I will always be poor. Filled with frustration, he put down his tools and left his workshop, determined to find a better life elsewhere. He walked for days, traveling from village to village, searching for opportunity, but everywhere he went, he found others struggling just as he had been. Finally, after months of wandering, he reached the house of a wise old man who was known for his knowledge of fate and destiny. "Please, sir," the carpenter begged, "tell me the truth. Is my fate already written? Am I meant to struggle forever?" The old man listened carefully, then smiled. "Come with me," he said. He led the carpenter to the edge of a dense forest. There, the old man pointed at two trees, one large and majestic, the other small and barely noticeable. "Do you see that small tree?" he asked. "Yes," the carpenter replied. The old man nodded. "That is an oak tree. It takes years for it to grow strong and mighty. Unlike other trees, it does not rush. It strengthens itself first, spreading its roots deep into the earth, ensuring that when it does grow, no storm can uproot it. The carpenter frowned. And the other tree? The old man smiled. That is a fast-growing tree. It shoots up quickly, but its roots remain shallow. When the first strong wind comes, it will fall. The carpenter was silent for a long time. Finally, he looked at the old man and asked, "So, what are you saying?" The old man placed a hand on his shoulder. "I am saying that your struggles are not proof of failure. They are proof that you are building something lasting. Fate does not decide who succeeds or who fails. It is patience, persistence, and belief that shape a person's destiny. Just like the oak, you must trust that your time will come." The carpenter returned to his village with new understanding. He picked up his tools once more, determined to keep working, to keep growing. And though it took time, he eventually became the most respected carpenter in the land, his skill known far and wide. He had learned that success was not about speed but about endurance. Iqbal finished his story, looking at Ahmed, whose eyes were thoughtful, reflecting on the meaning behind the tale. After a moment, Ahmed spoke, his voice quieter than before. "So, you're saying we have to keep going, even when it feels like nothing is changing?" Iqbal nodded. "Yes, my son. Because change is happening, even if we can't see it. Every day that you work hard, every time you refuse to give up, you are growing. And one day, when the time is right, you will rise." A long silence stretched between them, but this time, it was not filled with doubt. It was filled with understanding. Over the next few months, Ahmed approached his work differently. He still faced hardships. There were still days when the sun scorched the fields, when debts felt overwhelming, when exhaustion crept in, but he no longer let these moments break him. He no longer saw them as signs of failure. Instead, he saw them as part of the journey. One morning, as Ahmed was tending to a new patch of crops, he noticed something in the farthest corner of the field. He walked closer and stopped in surprise. The bamboo shoot, which had remained small for so long, had suddenly begun to grow. Not just a little, but rapidly. In the past few weeks, it had stretched taller than he had ever imagined, its green stalk standing proud against the sky. It was growing at an incredible speed, just as his father had said it would. Ahmed touched the bamboo gently, feeling a strange sense of connection to it. This plant had spent years hidden, growing where no one could see, preparing for this moment. And now, it was finally reaching its full potential. A slow smile spread across Ahmed's face. His father had been right. Success was not about immediate results. It was about trusting the process. It was about patience, about persistence, about quiet, unseen growth. And as he stood there, watching the bamboo sway gracefully in the morning breeze, he realized something else. He, too, was growing. Maybe not in ways that could be immediately seen, but in ways that truly mattered. He had built his roots. And one day, just like the bamboo, he would rise.